Good evening. We're going to call the meeting to order. It's 7 p.m. and this is the meeting of the Richfield Housing and Redevelopment Authority. The first item on our agenda is approval of the minutes of the special HRA meeting of January 25th, 2016, and the special concurrent City Council HRA and Planning Commission work session of January 26th, 2016.
So moved.
I'll second it.
It's been moved and seconded. Any questions or comments? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, we've approved the minutes. Next, we need to approve the HRA agenda for this evening.
I so move.
I'll second it. Seems
All right.
my role.
All right. All in favor of approving the agenda, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All right, we've approved the agenda. It appears that we have several items on the consent agenda tonight, so Mr. Devich.
Thank you, Chair Supple, members of the HRA, and for those in the audience and those watching at home, the consent calendar contains a number of separate items which are acted upon by the HRA in one motion. And then once the consent calendar has been approved, the individual items and the recommended actions will also have been approved, and no further action on these items is necessary. Tonight we have a couple of items on the consent, and it begins with consideration of the approval of the release of contract for private development and a resolution authorizing the repurchase of 7309 10th Avenue from Keyland Homes. And item B is consideration of the approval of a resolution authorizing the acquisition of certain properties within the city of Richfield. And that concludes tonight's consent calendar.
I'll move the calendar.
In my role, I'll second that.
All right, are there any questions? All right, all in favor of approving the consent calendar, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? We've approved the consent calendar. Thank you. All right, our next item is a public hearing regarding the development of the former city public works site. And did we want to do a staff report before starting the hearing?
Yes, again, thank you, Chair Supple, members of the HRA. I am going to turn this right over to Community Development Director John Stark, and I'm going to let him make that presentation to you.
Thank you, Chair Supple and Commissioners. Mesaba Capital is proposing to redevelop the former city public works site with 88 units of senior housing. The HRA staff, legal counsel, and representatives of the developer and their legal counsel have cooperatively drafted a proposed contract for private development for HRA consideration. The proposed agreement provides for conveyance of the development property to the developer for $1,219,000, contingent upon the developer obtaining all necessary land use approvals from the city and execution of a declaration of restrictive covenants. Development of the property with 88 units of senior housing, approximately 60 units of assisted living, and 28 units of memory care. Financial assistance in the form of tax increment financing in an amount not to exceed $2,400,000. We note here that we're asking you to give us leeway to adjust that number by up to $150,000, depending on updated TIF analysis from Ehlers and Associates. Under the city's 2008 comprehensive plan, the property is guided for medium-high density, 18 to 24 units per acre. The site is approximately 3.25 acres, which allows for a maximum of 78 units. The developer has stated that the project will require a minimum of 88 units in order to be financially feasible on an ongoing basis. The developer, therefore, will be seeking to change the designation to a high density, which allows for 24 plus units per acre. Given the surrounding land uses, staff would be supportive of the designation of the designated change that provided the developer executes a declaration of restrictive covenants that will restrict this property to a maximum of 88 units now and in the future, and that the developer would seek land use approvals for 88 units, which would further place restrictions on the developer, limiting the property to no more than 88 units. So that's maybe a long way of saying that our land use code doesn't break down in small increments. It's the medium high is 18 to 24, high is 24 plus, and there's no ceiling to it. We didn't feel comfortable with no ceiling, and we didn't think the neighbors would either. So that's why we're proposing to set the ceiling at 88, both through land use approvals and covenants that go with the property. The developer has agreed to these requirements. The payment for the land is to take place in 2 stages. First, a payment of $975,000 in cash at the time of closing, and then payment of the $244,000 balance with any tax increment available after the TIF note to the developer has been paid. In order to accomplish the payment mechanism for the $244,000 balance, the existing interfund loan resolution must be revised and adopted by the HRA. Just a couple of notes about that. Where the $975,000 comes from is that was the appraisal we had done a couple of years ago. And when we began discussions with Masaba, that's the number that they were using in their formulas, and they were able to accommodate that number. We very recently had an updated appraisal that gets us to the $1,219,000 number. So the good thing is our property appreciated quite a bit. Now, with the payment of the $244,000 through TIF, the way that would work, essentially to pay off the TIF note that the developer is getting, and we talked about that being the $2.4 million, that runs basically the entire duration of the TIF district and exhausts the TIF. But we are very conservative, and we always have been, on how we formulate our numbers. And we have assumed 0% inflation over the 25 years of the district. Notwithstanding what happened between 2005 and 2010, if you look at the long run of property, over a 25-year period, you'd almost always expect to see inflation. And so that's how we would get repaid, that as the property inflates, their note gets paid off early, and then there's money at the end of the district to repay the $244,000.
Can I ask a question about the TIF?
Sure.
Because it is TIFed, are we doing anything on affordability at all in the memory care units at all? Are we requesting that?
Yeah, well, I will tell you that with affordability, it's very, very difficult to kind of ascertain affordability in a senior unit, because what they're providing is services and housing, and it's almost impossible to separate the two out and say, this is the amount that a resident is paying for the medical services, the meals, other services that are provided, and this is the amount for housing. What we do know is the developer has done a market study, and the pricing of these units is intended for people that live in the area currently.
Okay.
And so it's priced for Richfield residents. And, the when you look at our demographics and the income numbers, I believe that would fall into kind of a generally accepted
Well, we'd like to see
definition
that
of
with
affordable.
TIF, right? I mean, if
Yep.
we give TIF, we'd like to see that some of our Richfield residents can make it into these units. I mean, that's what we care about. And now, it's all going to be memory unit, correct?
No, it's
Because there's a lot, I'm looking at this diagram, and it looks like there's an awful lot of memory care garden and
28 units of memory care.
28, okay.
Yep.
I haven't seen this in a while.
No, 60 units of assisted living and 28 units of memory care.
Okay, 28 memory.
And so, just to go off script a little bit, I know, or I believe anyway, that you received letters from a couple of residents. I think with some concerns about the land use and the kinds of use that are being proposed here. And it's not something that, just happened by accident. We've been just to go back in history a little bit, I think probably everybody remembers the Ron Clark proposal on the site. Believe it or not, that was like 5.5 years ago now.
Yeah.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah, that was a while back. That was
Started, yeah, but it
that was
lasted,
more than 140 units,
just lasted.
and it was 100% affordable. And I think the neighborhood was that was too much for the neighborhood to bear, and I think that that's understandable. And I think the policymakers understood that, and that's the way the vote went down. What we came out of that with was a better understanding of how the neighborhood wanted to see the site used. The hope was to have mixed income or market rate housing with a lower density. And so we have spent the last 5.5 years
trying to
talking to developers about that.
I have two.
Yep, and there was a proposal for 50 townhome units on the site, and that proposal came far from being able to work financially.
Right.
And there are a couple of issues. One is the west side of the property faces the railroad tracks and faces a number of 4- and 6-plex units. And every developer we've spoken with has told us that they didn't believe market rate housing could work there just because of the situation. And so it would have to be affordable housing. And so just using as an example, what we're looking at on Sheridan and 77th Street, Gimmick is building 6 townhome units there. Affordable housing, by its nature is heavily subsidized. Gimmick received the land for free, and they are also receiving about $25,000 a unit in additional subsidy just from us through our CDBG. If you look at just the west side of this property then, and you said, well, let's think about what affordable housing would look like there in townhomes, that would mean instead of getting paid $600,000 for that half of the site, that we would be giving it away for free and would really need to subsidize $25,000 for every unit that was built there, and that would probably be somewhere in the nature of 20 units. So that's $1 million in either lost income or money going out that we would be behind just on that half of the block. Then you say, well, let's turn around and on the other side of the block, let's just develop it for single-family homes, and that would maybe accommodate 6 or 7 single-family homes. Well, we sell those lots for about $50,000 a lot, and in talking, you guys are here every time that Andreas Custom Homes or anybody else is here for Richfield Rediscovered, and that's very tight margin for them to be able to afford $40,000, $45,000, $50,000 per lot. And so I guess to give an end to this story, we certainly could look at a lower density. We certainly could look at doing something different. But my belief is instead of selling the property for $1.2 million, we would end up getting $0 for the property and actually end up being in the hole to subsidize things going on there. And that's a policy decision. I don't know that we had this overt conversation per se, but this did come to you in a work session last August.
Yep.
And I think that everybody understands the context. And so in your decision-making then, and when you approved a preliminary agreement in September, I think a lot of that went into the decision-making that this is a use that we at the staff level feels would not be impactful to the neighborhood. Particularly, it's 88 units, but it's 88 units of senior housing that's not necessarily going to have the same kind of traffic or activity that you'd see with 88 units of other kinds of housing. And so we think it's a low-intensity use. We think it's a way for the HRA to recoup some money on this site and to take the proceeds that we're earning from the site and take that and find other issues elsewhere in the community that we can address with it. So, like I said, that's a little bit off script, but I just wanted to address the letters that you had received.
Mr. Devich.
Mr. Devich?
Thank you, Chair, members of the HRA. I also want to add that, since before the days that we decided to build a new maintenance facility on the east side of Richfield, it was always intended by the City Council to recoup some of the money that's sitting in that lot, and that money would go to assist some way or another the new maintenance facility. There's some things that didn't get done that need to get done there. And so a larger portion of that is going to be for the site where the garage sat, and that's going to go back towards the maintenance facility that we have debt on and that we have to put money into. So it's also important from that perspective, because I think everybody all along was counting on getting something from that site to help us back with the maintenance, the new maintenance facility.
All right, Commissioner Rubenstein?
I was not thrilled with the decision to move forward with this initially, but I have been convinced that this is indeed our best choice. I was concerned about the community there, but when I was reading through the packet today and saw that only 4 people from the neighborhood showed up at the neighborhood meeting about that, it was rather a bit of a shock for me that there was evidently people are complacent, if not happy, that something's going to be happening there. Otherwise, there would have been a much larger turnout. Regardless of the letters that came in. So I think that we've got the best of, and I'm not going to say a bad situation, but best of a difficult situation.
Challenging. It's a challenging site.
All right, well, this is a public hearing. Is there anybody in the audience that would like to comment?
And I would note that this was, published and mailed out as a public hearing, so this
All
speaks to Commissioner Rubenstein's point, I believe.
It does not appear that anyone wishes to speak to it, so we would need a motion to close the public hearing.
I so move.
Second.
All right, it's been moved.
Take it away.
All right, all in favor of closing the public hearing, please say aye.
Aye.
I have a question.
All
for
right, go
staff
ahead.
that isn't real relevant. So this was a city garage, and in the Ron Clark situation, the city had to weigh in as well as the HRA, because some of it was HRA property. Is it now all HRAs?
It is all HRAs. I think that the city manager and the finance manager would not be happy with the community development director if the community development director didn't find some way of honoring the obligation to get some money back into the city maintenance facility.
So even though it's now all the HRAs, some of the money is going to go back to the city if this goes through?
Yeah, that's the plan.
I'd just like to make a comment, because I remember when we were first looking at this, and we were trying to find something that would just work in that area for that neighborhood, and this came up, and when we talked about all the concerns about headlights and landscaping, they have gone out and done an incredible a lot of work. And actually, I even see, as I can look at this little tiny drawing and see some of this with the resident that is still there, and putting up a nice block retaining wall and things of that sort. I think it really makes a lot of difference that they're very cognizant of their neighbors, and they understand what kind of community they're moving into, that people really know each other. And, they talked about having gardens outside and for their residents and other such things. So I was really pleased to see that, because I know we have noon outs for a lot of our senior residents, so I'm looking forward to coming over and visiting with them at that time too.
The other thing that I think it does fill a need we have for memory care in the city that's shown up in some of the studies, and so I think that's also helps the community as a whole. Are there any other discussion points before we vote? All right. So first of all, we have a resolution to approve the contract for private development with Masaba Capital LLC and authorize the conveyance of interest in the land, in certain land, and approve the revised resolution for an interfund loan in the amount of $544,000. Is there a motion to that effect?
I so move.
I'm leaving it to you because I'm less
Second.
enthused than you are.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? All right, we have approved the resolution, authorized the conveyance of interest, and approved the revised resolution. Thank you. All right, the next item.
Excuse me,
Oh, go
question
ahead.
for Mr. Stark or Mr. Devich.
Go ahead.
I didn't read the entire massive document here. Do we have a proposed start date or anything like that?
Yeah, I believe they have to start by November 1st. Is that right? Yeah, start construction by November 1st. And they have to have achieved their land use approvals by September 30th, is my recollection. But there are benchmarks along the way.
Great.
I have a question too that isn't totally germane. So, you know, they're only using part of the parcel for their project. There's a resident that's using part of it. Did they indicate that in the future they might want to expand on their campus?
Yeah, I don't think that's the case. Yeah, with the covenants that we're requiring to be on there with density, I think it would, I wouldn't be surprised if the HRA ended up selling it to them as green space, you know.
Or we could make it a park ourselves.
Yeah,
So-
Pocket Park.
So the density at 88 involves the entire parcel that they're acquiring
Mhm.
with the exclusion of the private residence that's there.
Yes.
All right, are there any other questions before we move on? All right, our next item is the HRA discussion items. Does anyone have anything they'd like to bring up? All right, then we'll move on to the executive director's report.
Thank you, Chair Supple, members of the HRA. I really don't have any report to make this evening.
All right. Well, then we are claims and payroll.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the claims and payroll. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? We've approved the claims and payroll. If there are no objections, we will adjourn.
All right. Thank you.